Hello and welcome back to the Doctor's Garage. So in this video today, I'm in my Land Rover Defender 90 TD5 and I'm going to be telling you about the difference it's made having my suspension changed in my Defender. So I've had the Alive comfort springs put on this car and also the Fox shocks. If you didn't see my last video, I did a whole video of getting that fitted. Now, before I start this video, I'm going to say, honestly, if you use your Defender for daily driving, if you've had it remapped or are thinking of getting it remapped, I cannot recommend enough getting your suspension changed. I've been really surprised with the differences that I've noticed in my Defender, living with it and driving with it. It makes me want to drive this car so much more than I used to. And I'm going to be talking about the ride height in this video, so the before and the after. I'm going to be talking about how this car handles driving fast, driving slow, going through potholes, what it's like through cornering. Now it's got that anti-roll bar installed, and tell you about the kit that I put on this car and those key differences that I've noticed. So if you're interested in any of that, stick around for today's video. So for those that didn't see the previous video, I went over to Alive Tuning. I had the Alive comfort springs put on my Defender and also the Fox shocks. I went for standard height on the springs. At this point, I've got to say, Alive Tuning are giving you guys 5% off any suspension parts. That's individual springs, shocks, or the full ride setup like I had. Contact them, tell them you saw them on the Doctor's Garage, and they'll give you that 5% discount. So before we begin and take a look outside my car, talk about those differences and look at the setup on my truck, let's talk a bit more about springs, because there's a lot about suspension in general I didn't realise. So the springs that came off my Defender were linear springs, and linear springs mean that the distance between the coils is equal. And what it means is you've got one type of spring rate. So it means that 100 kilos compresses it, let's say, an inch, another 100 kilos would compress it another inch, another 100 kilos would compress it another inch. These are my old springs, as you can see, and they have that linear pattern, so each one is the same distance. And that's okay if you're trying to achieve one specific thing, so handling or comfort. Now, if you want to achieve both of those things together, you can't do that with a linear spring. So what manufacturers do to get around that, to get comfort and handling in a ratio that you desire, is they have unequal distances between the coils, and that's called a progressive spring. And that means that you can have handling and comfort together. And so the springs I've had fitted on this, which are the Alive comfort springs, are progressive. They're originally made by iBack, so I know that they're of a great quality that Alive use. And they're the springs I've had fitted on my truck, and progressive means that you can get that dual ability of being able to be good at handling and also good for comfort. Now for me, the Alive comfort springs are more focused around a comfort ride. They improve the handling no end, but they're certainly not as stiff as some other springs that I may want if this was, say, a track car. Not that I don't know why you'd want your Defender to be a track car, but if it was, that would be a more suitable spring type. The other thing I had fitted on my Defender was new shocks, and I went for Fox shocks in the end. So at Alive Tuning, I had two choices really. It was either the Bilsteins or the Fox. I've read so many good things about the Fox shocks in general that I was almost certain they were going to be the ones I wanted to go for. From a price point of view, I paid a bit more having the Fox shocks, but I do think they'll hopefully last a bit longer and actually provide more of the kind of ride that I want. So when I speak to the guys at Alive and deciding what to go for, like ride height, but also shock type, I wanted something that was better at day-to-day driving, so more comfort focused, rather than the Bilsteins, which are more geared towards more of a stiffer ride, so probably a slightly better handling shock. If you were building more of a fast road race Defender, the Bilsteins would probably be a better choice because your handling is improved over the comfort. And that's where you get that difference between the types of spring choice, for example, of what you might go for if you were looking at pairing them with a pair of stiffer shocks like the Bilsteins. When I was also at Alive, we did a competition, so you can win loads of merchandise from Alive Tuning. Just head over to the Instagram and you'll see how to enter that competition. I'll be announcing the winner on the 20th of Feb when I'm actually going to be at the show 4x4 Expo on Sunday over in Stafford. So the final thing I had fitted to my Defender, which has made it drive so well, is the anti-roll bar. And I had fitted the Alive anti-roll bar, which again is produced by iBack, so again really good quality. And some Defenders coming out of the factory had anti-roll bars and some didn't. Mine actually didn't have one at all, and I cannot tell you how much a difference that has made, and I'll show you when we go driving what that feels like to actually drive with it. So even if you did have the roll bar, that was 15 millimeters from factory. The anti-roll bar, so custom fitted, the uprated one is 25 mil. So quite a bit thicker, and just it provides that extra stiffness really that really holds the car flat rather than it rolling around so much like it used to. They're the main parts I had fitted. There was a few other things that I had galvanized fitted, such as the turret tops at the front that you probably saw in the previous video, just clean it up really, because they were kind of rotting out a little bit. So let's go for a drive, let's measure the height, and I'll tell you all about what that looks like now. I'll show you what that looks like, but also tell you about what it's like to drive and those key differences that I've noticed. You've probably seen them as well, for those that are very observant and watch the channel regularly. The headline looks a little bit different. That is going to be my next video. I've got a very, very cool bit of tech that I've fitted in this Defender. It's fitted and it went really, really well for me, which is quite a surprise, but I'm looking at it right now. I'm going to show you in the next video because I'm very excited to share that with you too. So I have the measurements of my Defender before, between the wheel arch and the tread. So the first one was on the front, and on the front the ride height was 4.5 inches, and on the rear it was 5 inches, and that, like I say, top of the tread to the edge of the wheel arch. So I have in here my handy little ruler that you can probably just see on the camera. I'm gonna go measure that now and see the difference. It's very windy outside, but bear with me. So just take a look at the car now. I think it's sitting way better. It's definitely settled in since I first had it done. The stance of the car now is just way better too. I'm really pleased with how it's looking, and those measurements show as well. So we've gone down to about 2 inches, and just say 2.5 on the front, 2.5 on the rear, from 4.5 and 5, and that was because my car was on a slight lift before, and now it's settled in. It's looking really good. I'm really pleased with how this car looks overall. So quite a big difference there in the ride height actually. I didn't think it was probably going to measure as much as it did. When I was over at a live tuning, it wasn't that dramatic. There wasn't that much of a drop, but now I've been driving the car and it's kind of bedded in. We've definitely got a reduction in the height, which actually for me is perfect. It's really what I wanted. I'm glad I didn't go for the lowered springs because that would be even tighter to the wheel arches. So it's perfect for me actually what we went for. So let's go for a drive now and let's put all this equipment to the test. And I'll tell you about one of the key things that I'm finding is the difference of having this new suspension setup. So let's talk about what a difference just get up to speed. What a difference the suspension has made to my Defender. And I think the biggest thing I've noticed really is I want to take this car out so much more. Before, I didn't avoid driving it, but it wasn't anywhere near as enjoyable to drive as it is now. And it's quite hard to describe the exact key differences that I've felt, but I'm going to talk about a few of the ones that I've really noticed more than anything else. So the first thing, which was quite surprising to me, is actually how it handles at higher speeds. For those that have a TD5 that's got the normal standard gearbox in, you'll know that when you get to about 50, 60, it's not just a bit uncomfortable, but also quite noisy, and it feels a bit out of control. And it still definitely feels out of control now, but it feels less out of control than it did. So it means that I can get up to 60, 70 miles per hour, and it doesn't wallow about quite as much as it used to. It feels much more locked in than it used to as well. And I think that's a combination of the springs. Obviously the shocks are actually working. As you probably saw in the previous video I did, the previous shocks compressed and took about 20 minutes to come back out. So they definitely weren't helping with the ride at all. But I think one of the biggest things that really made a difference with that is the anti-roll bar, because that just holds the whole body and chassis together in a much more rigid way. So high-speed driving now and actually going on longer distances has become way, way easier. When you're at slower speeds and normal driving around town, even now, going over a few bumps here, there before that would have been pretty agonizing, to be honest. There was a lot of clunks, a lot of wallowing about, sort of shaking around in the car. It really felt like a farmer's truck, which at the end of the day is what these cars originally were designed for. Whereas now it just drives more like a car. And not that you want to compare your Defender to something like a Golf, but honestly, when you're driving it at lower speeds in potholes and stuff, you get more of a car Golf-like feeling from it. So for me, it just makes it much more enjoyable to drive. It's much more enjoyable for passengers to be in the car as well. I think the favorite thing for me, the standout feature really, is cornering. Before, this car felt not very good when you were going into corners, particularly if you're going a little bit quick, whereas now with the new stiffness that it's got and combined with the remap, you can really have a lot of fun on country back roads. It just feels like it's way more locked in when you're driving, and especially with the remap now, I actually feel like I can use that remap and it feels just a lot more fun really to handle and get about. I think the only thing missing now for me is the exhaust note, because I can hear the TD5 under the bonnet, as you can probably hear in this video when we get going. But I think you kind of miss burble that this TD5 could put out if I had an aftermarket exhaust. So that could be the next project. I know when I was at Live, I was speaking to the guys down there about their system. I want something that's going to pass the MOT still. We've got a problem there with the cat box, so any suggestions about getting around that and still passing the MOT but getting a great sound from your Defender, let me know in the comments below. So for me, the standout differences with my Defender and the new Alive suspension setup and the new shocks and anti-roll bar and all that would be three things. Firstly, at higher speeds it handles so much better. It feels much more safer in my Defender when I'm driving at higher speeds, and it feels a lot more locked in and makes me want to actually drive longer distances more often. Secondly is cornering. Cornering has been completely changed since I've had this new setup on my car. It feels way better around corners. It doesn't lean over and you don't get all that body roll that you used to get, and it returns much quicker when you're going through corners. So you know where you are and it feels much more in control. And the final thing is, if you've got a remap, it opens up a whole new world of driving with your Defender. It really makes that difference I was looking for with my Defender. The final piece missing, probably that exhaust note. But apart from that, I'm absolutely over the moon with how good it has made my Defender drive. It's probably my favorite upgrade I've done to my car, even dare say better than when I had my remap done, although I think together they work really well. I'm going to be at 4x4 Expo on the 20th of February over in Stafford, so come and see me if you're going to be there. I'll be around the whole show, and also my truck is going to be on the Alive tuning stand, so you can come and have a look at my Defender in real life. Remember to enter the competition, and remember you get 5% off for the next 4 weeks off any Alive suspension parts. So give them a call, mention Alive tuning and get that discount.